So here's our series on how to nail down an extra $1,000 or more a month, every single month. Some tips and some things to think about. Um, so tip number one is to charge for all your working time. This by far is the number one thing that people who work in the skilled trades do not do. There's a perception that you are only working for those hours where your boots are on the ground, but the truth is that if you are running your own company, there's a lot of other time and energy that is spent doing other things. So you want to definitely consider that for sure. So getting into like, how do you do that? Ultimately, thinking is working. So, those things like planning and coordination are things that in larger companies, there are individuals that are paid specifically to perform that work, and they're paid well to perform that work. So, managing schedules, managing suppliers, doing all of those other things, that takes a lot of time. Now, if you are, say, a carpenter and you're only charging your customers for the time or for the hours that you are standing on the job site with your boots on, then all of that other time, getting your materials to site, making sure with other contractors that things are ready, all of that time is you giving your time away for free. When if you were a larger company, that would be time that would be charged for. Now, I'm not saying you surprise your customers with these charges, but certainly this is an area where if you inform them up front that the coordination and project management time will be tracked and will be invoiced separately, this is an area that makes a really, really big difference. And it's especially important when you start growing and you have other people performing the work, because it's really easy to turn into a situation where all of your time is not being accounted for and you're not charging enough for the individuals on the job site to cover the cost of yourself. Now, the other one is communication. So, communication both with your customers, but also with respect to suppliers and other things. Now, I'm not saying that you charge your customer 15 minutes every time you send them a text message. That would be cheap. But what I am talking about is, again, going along with the coordination standpoint, if you have to call suppliers and you need to communicate with them about what the needs are, and say your customer is changing their mind often, and so you need to plan meetings with them to go through the stuff more so than the minimum requirement. This is an area too where, as long as your customer is aware, you know what, those meetings, that communication is something that we're going to be charging for. So it's how you do it can vary depending upon your business, but definitely this is an area where you want to make sure that you're at least asking yourself, when you're performing work for that customer, is it appropriate for me to charge them for this? And most of the time, it is. Takeoffs. So if you've been handed a set of plans and you're expected to identify what the material list is going to be, then that time, that can take a long time. And even if you're really good at it and your piece is quite small, this is an area too where if there's regular and ongoing material lists that need to happen in order for materials to be ordered, this is probably not something that you're doing when you're on the job site. This is probably something you're doing later in the evening. You're doing it sitting at a desk, sitting at your couch, doesn't really matter where. But when you're doing material lists or takeoffs, definitely if you're performing the work yourself, this is something that you want to pass that along to your customer. Now, a little tip also is that if you, depending upon which industry you're in specifically, a lot of your professional companies that supply you with materials do have teams that will do this. So if you're purchasing your material from a local lumber supplier, often they will have somebody that will do the takeoff and do the material list, but in exchange, you're expected to purchase your materials there. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about why there are other benefits to that, but this is also an area too where you don't necessarily have to pass that cost along, but if there was an out-of-pocket cost for it, definitely you'd want to pass it along. And the final one here with respect to the thinking is the inspections and the permits. Technically, you're not working if you're waiting for an inspector, but you can't perform other work. So there's going to be periods of time here where you're waiting, you're meeting with inspectors, you're preparing permit documentation. So you're not swinging a hammer, but you're performing work that is required for that job to move forward. And so all of these things, all of these thinking kind of activities are in fact working activities. So getting a handle on that thought process, and I'm thinking about this customer's job right now. I'm doing this for this customer's job right now. I need to do this. I'm making notes. It doesn't have to be a complicated way, but it's a conversation up front, and then it's some method of tracking it, whether it's in your phone. You can have like a little notebook where you just write down the number, the general activity, and the number of hours. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be complicated. But once you start actually tracking and charging for this time, you will find that it will go way, way up in terms of income coming in. Was speaking with an electrician who runs multiple crews, very successful business, and we were talking about this idea of thinking is working and charging for your time. And he pointed out that he was working full time for one customer, and it was a very large job. But in fact, he was not charging for his time at all. So he realized that he was the biggest drain on his business. Now, if it's a function, again, that a larger business would be paying somebody to perform, just because you're the guy performing it and it's your business doesn't mean that you can't charge for it. So thinking is working. Think about all the things. If you are thinking about your customer's job, can you charge for that time? And most of the time, the answer is yes. So I'm Erica, and I am the founder of Jig Savvy. I've been in and around this. If you want to learn more about tips and tricks in order to earn an extra $1,000, $2,000, $4,000 a month, this is part of our series. So stay tuned for our series and check back in. Otherwise, we can be found at jigsavvy.com.